I'm going to get myself in trouble here for absolutely no reason.
You're the one who keeps talking about policy. I'm here just like, hey, let's talk about horse trading. And you're like, well, let's get into the weeds. I've been reading a lot of bills in my free time.
I've also declared war on potholes. So here's the first shot across the bow.
Well, as you know, with Planet Albany, there's always something that makes the planet turn.
And it's this amazing view of D.C., and Eddie Vedder comes out. And he goes, you have a cigarette? And I've never smoked in my life, but if I had, I wish that was the moment.
And this strategy takes us from potholes to knotholes.
I would like to say it was a pleasure, Mr. Kim. But I'm on the road.
I'm David Lombardo, and this is Dispatches from Planet Albany, a WCNY podcast about power and politics in New York State government. And on this week's show, we're checking in with former Assemblymember Ken Zebrowski, who now works at Brown Weinraub, and he's back to talk about the end of session and reflect on his own experience trying to get bills through this mad rush. And you're back in this Capitol right now with just 2 weeks on the calendar, and I'm curious, is that reflected in the mood as you're around the Capitol? Can you tell that time is running out? Is there a desperation in the air that you can smell?
You know, I just walked in and walked up, so I haven't been in the Capitol too much, so I haven't got a sense of that. Thinking back to when I was in the Assembly, there was always that sense of sort of rush. You know, you got done with the budget, and then you felt like within a week or two it was closed down, which was, difficult and frustrating.
And what does close down look like? Because I think people don't understand really how after a certain time, bill introductions change, the committee process changes. What does it mean to sort of close down the session?
It's just sort of an informal term of like wrapping things up, right? So things have to follow a certain structure and a process. So how many more committee meetings are you going to have? What is out there? Have people filed 99s? What do you have to consider? Are there extenders or things that have to get done that the committees have to do? So you just got to get in your mindset that there are X amount of weeks left or X amount of days left, and here's how you're going to structure your committee process. So if you're staff or a chair or even a member, you just got to, think about that like you would think of anything else in life that has an end date that you have to get things done by.
People in the hallways, as I talk to them, seem unbelievably frustrated this year, uniquely so. And I'm not just talking about lobbyists, but lawmakers, particularly from your old house, are struggling to come to grips with what they're able to get done this year. And I'm curious if you ever felt sad, mad, bad come June.
I tried to always keep a level head about it. The budget dragged on this year, and when that happens, it condenses the rest of session, and there's a bandwidth issue. Passing bills and passing laws, for the most part, takes time, it takes deliberation, it takes staff review, and there's only so much you can get done during that time. And during the budget, the staff is so inundated with budgetary things that I think, there's not the bandwidth to maybe get it done during those months either. So legislators feel like, they maybe have a priority list of 10 or 20 and it's down to, 5 or 10 just because of time and bandwidth issues.
And how does someone be successful in these final 2 weeks if you're in the Assembly? Are you just, hey Jen Best, hey Gary, hey Carl? I mean, who are you talking to? Is it staff? Is it lawmakers? Who's the person who can really move the needle if you're an Assembly member right now?
It's kind of like a secret sauce, and it's probably not one way to do it. I always found one being realistic about what you can get done. If you're here a number of years, you start to get a feel for your bills and legislation and know what is ready to be passed. So don't spend your time and your bandwidth on 20 things when you really know that 5 are ready to go, because you're going to, not push those 5 as much. Second of all, don't go right to Jen or to the Speaker or to, Assemblymember Pretlow. Do the work in the off session and do the work in the beginning of the session to talk to staff, to talk to the analysts and the committee councils, to get them up to speed, to answer any questions, to have any meetings that need to happen, to amend the bills, so that you're not trying to do all that at the end. And then just try to be realistic in your priorities. You know, a lot of legislators have local things they have to get done, or it's really going to lead to something at home, an unintended consequence, you know, whether it's a tax extension or something like that. But then in terms of the substances stuff, you know, be realistic and pick a handful of priorities. Make sure you did the background work on it. And then you can, you know, go to someone at the top of the food chain if you need to, you know, maybe shake it loose somehow.
Was there ever a situation where the end of session was rapidly approaching for you and you're like, fuck, I need this bill. This is like a tax extender somebody's counting on. This is some sort of local bill that somebody's counting on back home, and I cannot come back to Rockland County without at least the Assembly moving this bill.
Yeah, I can't think of something where it like almost didn't happen, though. I was always pretty good, and my staff was pretty good, and the Assembly Central staff was pretty good at keeping a handle on those things of what needed to get done, and I can't think of anything that like almost fell through the cracks. I can remember, you know, being frustrated in the last few days that there just wasn't going to be enough debate time, right? There's just a culture in the Assembly of long debates, of multiple members of the minority debating a bill, and there's only so many hours in a day. And so, you know, you start to whittle your list down from 7 to 5 to 4 to 2.
And there's only so many hours on the day. There's only so many days in the session calendar. This year, though, the Speaker has said we're adding 3 more days. Strategically, do you think that's a mistake? Because this is a chamber, both houses really, that need a deadline to get stuff done. And they've just said, we've got 3 extra days to pass resolutions, to go have fun softball games. I mean, maybe they shouldn't have done the 3 extra days that way. Don't tell them. Just say pack some extra clothes. Who knows what might happen?
I would never say the Speaker made a mistake. I assume, and I don't know this, but I assume they realistically looked at the amount of work and the number of days left and said, instead of trying to frantically, you know, reach this deadline, I don't think anybody really looks at the calendar and didn't already count that Friday as going an extra day. I would have always counted it.
Yeah, because they were scheduled for June 12th, but there's always an assumption that you're going to go into Friday if Thursday's the last day. If not, maybe Saturday too.
Right. And so maybe there was just a decision made of like, we've gone through this, you know, how many years? And let's
Carl's 11th.
And just add on those additional days. But like anything else in life, things that need to be compromised on, it always seems like nobody moves until the last second, whether that's the budget, or whether that's legislation or anything else. So it does sometimes feel like no matter what the last day is, it's going to be, you know, a full sprint until that final minute. But you know, there's local calendars and things like that. So I'm sure they looked at the volume of work and just said, we need those extra couple days. And it probably makes sense. You know, as a member, you always want to be able to plan, right? You want to be able to tell your spouse or your kids or whatever, you know, I'm going to be home this time and back up this time. So, you know, folks probably have Little League games and things on Saturday and Sunday, and now they'll know they'll leave probably on Friday and come back on Monday. The last couple of years in particular, I can remember, I think I was coaching my daughter's team, and I was freaking out about getting home for the first game because I was like the manager or I had like a dance recital or something. So I would much rather come back the next week in an orderly way than worry about, you know, whether or not I could make something at home on a Saturday or Sunday.
And it's also probably helpful to let the mistresses in Albany know that you're going to be back for some extra days too, because they don't want to be caught flat-footed, you know, not knowing what's going on. But you mentioned the idea of the debate, and if I'm a lawmaker right now in the Assembly with something that I want to get across the finish line, should I be reaching out to Mary Beth Walsh, Ed Robb, being like, hey, this bill's really not a big deal. You realize really, you know, you don't need to debate this one, or do you have concerns? Maybe I can address them now, so we don't have to have, 5 rounds of what does this do? How does it do it? Have we considered the costs? Yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, I did that a bit. I tried to do it on things like that maybe I felt like weren't controversial, not necessarily a philosophical issue, and maybe I could clear up some misconceptions before to sort of, reduce the debate time. Or in some cases, there are debates that end up in unanimous vote after. So if you think it's going to be one of those, maybe it'll even come off the debate list and go on consent.
And would they say, great job, Ken, you convinced us? Or sometimes it'd be, sorry, Ken, we're going to have to, put you through the ringer.
So I left with Andy Goodell, and Andy would be very upfront about it. These are my questions, and can't do it, Ken. We got to do this stuff on the floor.
Yeah, it makes me think about The Godfather. One last time, for old time's sake, can you let me go? Can you let me go, Andy? This session has not been particularly overwhelming in terms of what's gotten done as standalone bills. And thinking about what might get done, nothing major comes to mind. And Senate Majority Leader Stuart Cousins was asked about the possibility of the governor advancing some sort of legislative package, and her response was, hey, don't give the second floor any ideas. Is there anything on your radar that you think might get done this year that people aren't counting on, or does it seem like we're going to kind of go out with a whimper, so to speak?
I guess it's always in the eye of the beholder. Legislators will all have important issues. You'll read about things that may be interesting in or important to one given area. I think I was reading something this morning about John McDonald and a pharmacy issue.
The hormonal shots in the arm. They changed the bill with SED to basically go from a non-specific patient order to a patient-specific order in order to calm the fears of SED.
Right. So maybe not top of the newspaper, but...
And the Senate did not follow through with amending their version of the bill, so all negotiations are likely for naught.
But important to, I'm sure, whatever patient walks to the door of a pharmacy. But I think when I look at things that have been around for a bit and are going to be debated, probably the environmental sector are the issues that seem to be
Is this the year the New York Heat Act gets to the finish line? Do you want to weigh in on that?
I had this saying when I was in the legislature, which is New York should be a leader, but not an outlier. And, with the HEAT Act, you're talking about people's natural gas access. There are many people in my home district that would, that heat their homes with natural gas. I think like 90%.
I feel like you're about to make a policy argument, but let's just talk about the politics of it. Do you think it's going to happen? Because it seems like a no.
Well, the politics are this. I remember doing a hearing on the issue, and someone said to me, well, what are people back home saying on this? And I said, well, that's the problem, is nobody back home is saying anything on this. No. And I think it's one of the issues with being up here is we kind of get into a bubble, like who's in the hallway, who's chanting, who's holding signs, all very important, all part of the democratic process, small d democratic process. But back at home, a lot of these things, nobody has any idea what's happening.
Yeah, blank stare if you brought up the HEAT Act in anywhere in the state.
Or EPR, or and these other things. So politically, you kind of don't know until a year or two after what's going to happen politically. So, a lot of these things will depend on whether or not the bills come more to the middle, more towards what other states are doing, or is it sort of an all or nothing debate? And if they're all or nothing debates, people are going to have to make difficult political choices.
Well, sticking with that all or nothing idea, there's some rumbling about the HEAT Act bill getting broken up into maybe 2 or 3 parts. It's sort of big components, whether it's the subsidies for your utility bills, the restrictions on subsidizing some of these natural gas hookups, and whatever the other part of the bill would be. Sorry, listeners, I don't remember. Does something like that make it more palatable to maybe move one or all parts of that?
It certainly makes it more palatable. The question is, does it make it more palatable to the folks that are pushing those bills? So,
no, it does not.
Right. So there's the 100-foot rule, which I think could always probably have been passed somewhere along the line. The 6% is interesting, right? Because I think there are ways that you could help the Public Service Commission meet that goal of 6% and maybe not shift it onto other folks. And then it's the discontinuance of the natural gas infrastructure in New York State. To me, that was always the most controversial part of the bill. I always feared going back home and in 3 years, on South Mountain Road in New City, my utility saying, hey, this is only 30 homes. We're not going to replace this gas leak. And then they're stuck with $30,000 or $40,000. So that to me was always the biggest issue. I think they could break it up. I think they've actually amended the bill several times. I was reading it recently. So I think
shits and giggles?
It's still kind of what I do. It's read legislation. And I was interested in that. I was a chair of the committee that dealt with that. So I've been interested in just sort of watching that bill. And I think they have, amended that bill in a way that has made it much more possible for passage. But they could break it up, but that's up to sometimes the advocates.
If they did break it up, though, then you'd have to get the Senate to come along with that strategy, which seems like a crazy lift if they've already passed it or are comfortable passing it as a standalone bill.
I don't think one house would break it up. I think if they broke it up, it'd sort of be an agreement between the two houses.
Well, before we move on, we're at the part in the show where we need to talk about money. And first, we're going to mention the underwriters who give us money. And that includes New York State United Teachers as well as National Fuel. And if you're enjoying this program, maybe you could become a recurring supporter of the program, which you can do by visiting capitalpressroom.org/donate. And now we're going to get back to our conversation with former Assemblymember Ken Zebrowski. And we'll pick up by talking about his driving as he continues to make the trip from Rockland County to Albany and back, but without the benefit of a per diem.
I got this new truck. It's a Ford Maverick. I got the hybrid version.
A truck? Ken Zebrowski has a truck?
It's a hybrid pickup truck, and it's
why?
Great.
Why do you have a pickup truck?
Because I've got a lot of baseball stuff. I coach the West Nike Unicorns.
Okay, I'm still hearing minivan at this point, but keep going.
And the T-ball Giants. I do a lot of mulching.
Okay.
Big mulch guy. And it also gets, locally I can get 40 miles plus a gallon, but it gets 30 to 32. So
why not?
What's the difference? Why not? Exactly. Like, right now in the back is, a whole bunch of baseball stuff. It sort of, fits my ability to truck around the kids and throw stuff into the back and do some yard work and things like that while still getting, reasonable gas mileage.
And how is your quality of life now that you're, 5 months out of the assembly officially?
It's mixed. My wife would probably say my phone rings just as much, if not more. Monday through Friday, I am on the run as much probably as I ever was. I'm also, I'm the president of my local business association, so I have events with that.
That's very prestigious.
Thank you. However,
first line of the obituary probably.
Friday nights, Saturdays, Sundays are more my own. I can set my schedule a little bit more. I'm not up here in session in the chambers until 8, 9 o'clock at night, staying overnight. I do a lot of ups and backs, for better or worse. Mm-hmm. So I'm coaching my 2 little kids' teams, that was part of it. Saturdays, I'm not getting up and saying to my wife, all right, I got 2 events, then I'll come back to the house for a couple hours. You do what you got to do, and then I got to get back, and I have a dinner, and then maybe around 8 o'clock, I'll be back home. It's not that anymore. I'm looking at my email. My phone might ring, but I'm a little bit more able to plan my schedule with my kids and my family.
Do you want to weigh in on the governor and her reelection chances in 2026? Clear sailing?
I've always gotten along with the governor back when she was lieutenant governor. I thought she was great.
Everybody liked her when she was lieutenant governor.
It's a tough job.
Lieutenant governor or governor?
Governor.
Okay.
The buck stops there. You've got to make these difficult decisions. You're in an impossible sort of political and media ecosystem right now. I think she's tried to do and has done a lot of things. They came out of this budget with a lot of wins. On affordability, on making a better business climate for folks, the UI debt issue.
Will any of those wins though translate into an uptick in her numbers?
That's the difficult thing. How do you get from those policy wins down to resonating into polls? It's difficult. And, I think, we're so polarized that a certain part of the electorate is just probably never going to move.
Is that the people who met her?
That's unfair.
Oh, sorry.
That's unfair.
That was a joke. That was not how I feel.
I'll say, I'll use the cliche about elections or about choices. You got to get into the next year, see what the candidates are, see what
Right.
the issues are, and then start to distill down, in polls like that. It's tough to really see when you're just, an open-ended poll right now. I feel like the electorate's in a mood where I think it's hard for anybody to get, really high percentages in a poll.
And this is actually a point of a joke that Robert Ort made in the LCA show that you skipped. And he talks about how generic candidate is doing well against the governor. And he then announced his campaign for governor, Rob Ort, generic candidate. He goes, who's more generic than, me? And I'm thinking, hey, good-looking white guy with good hair. Okay, he could be him, could be Billy Jones. We don't know. But I think the choices thing you make is a really important argument, because if your choice in the Democratic primary is Governor Kathy Hochul versus some guy you never heard of, Kathy Hochul's going to win. If your choice in the general election is Kathy Hochul or an upstate Republican congresswoman who's been closely aligned to a really unpopular president in a midterm climate that's not very beneficial to Republicans, your choice is going to be Kathy Hochul again. So I think we in the media often forget about the actual choices that people have and just get so wrapped up in these hypothetical scenarios that are never actually going to come to fruition, or just forget about the idea that generic candidate, doesn't exist. Ken Zebrowski is a living, breathing human being and not just a Ken doll, so to speak.
Right. And I just think when you're a few years out, it's just so difficult to sort of like game out
13 months till the primary.
I guess that's not very far.
How about in your neck of the woods in Rockland County? What's going to happen with your congressman? Is he going to get reelected, assuming he runs again?
He works really hard, has already gotten reelected. I think even though people targeted him, I would never count out Mr. Lawler.
Are you speaking with your DBA president hat on right now, or Ken Zebrowski, political observer?
Political observer.
Is that what it is? The DBA? Did I get it wrong? It's not that. It's like the Rockland County.
the
Rockland. What is your group?
The business? The RBA.
RBA. Yes.
I think you're saying
not the Downtown Business
I thought you were saying
Association.
doing business as.
Oh no.
Rockland.
Do you have a Ken Zebrowski DBA?
No.
You don't have like some side hustles? Okay.
No.
But yeah, so don't count Lawler out.
Yeah, don't count him out. But obviously, historically, a midterm election of a sitting president is not great for that person's party. So I think that's probably why you see a lot of noise. But he's certainly sort of proven himself at adept at winning elections. So.
Won by a bigger margin in 24 than 22.
He did.
And do you think the Republican Party is making a big mistake by writing him off as a gubernatorial candidate?
Am I in a position to give advice to the Republican Party?
You are a handsome white guy, so they would take it from you. They'd be like, he's one of our own.
Look, if you're the Republican Party trying to win in New York, I would think the path is through a moderate Republican.
Or someone who's at least perceived to be moderate.
And probably a moderate downstate Republican.
And Rockland County's downstate?
Yes.
Definitely not upstate.
No.
Do you want to weigh in on where upstate starts?
I think it starts somewhere around New Paltz.
Okay.
I live 26 or 27 miles from Yankee Stadium. How could I be upstate?
I mean, I guess the answer, as John would say, is in your heart. But coming back to this area, one of the topics in the budget that I was a little surprised got so little attention was the way they came up with for funding the MTA's capital needs. Yeah. And I'm curious whether you think that's going to have any political fallout, or the Democrats crafted the perfect plan that offers some tax relief to some, taxes, only a certain type of business or number of businesses, that this isn't going to be a conversation piece in 2026, at least in a meaningful way.
The MTA needs to be funded. It is an economic driver, not just in New York City, but in the entire region, and by that argument, the entire state. But it is never popular when you're trying to get new funding. And my home county of Rockland, we don't have a train that you can get on and get into the city. We have trains run by New Jersey Transit. They're single tracks. You got to get down to get over.
Get down to get over. I like that.
And so it's not well received. Talking to certain businesses, I was talking to a not-for-profit provider, Joanio, in my district, major developmental disability organization, and I think they said it was cost them a couple $100,000. And so
The change.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so they were helped in the budget in one way, and then, the couple $100,000. And I think it was talked about of maybe exempting, but then of course, you got to go up if you're going to exempt a whole bunch of folks. But you would think, maybe some local governments and some not-for-profits might have been a way to go, especially if they're doing, some of that work. But, that's what it means. So, yeah, even though it's a really small percentage to her organization, couple $100,000.
There's a difference, though, between something that's unpopular and something that's unpopular and people actually care about it. So is it the latter? Is it something that is annoying enough to people and annoying to enough people that it moves the needle? Or is it going to be one of those things that maybe it's 8th or 9th on people's mind when they're voting?
I think it's 8th or 9th. Okay. But I think that's a shift, right? In 2010, it seemed to be top of mind.
But was that a reflection, though, of what they were doing? Is that a reflection of the atmosphere? I don't know. Because it was a bloodbath on Long Island. Goodbye, Craig Johnson. Goodbye, Brian Foley.
Yeah, sometimes I think like the ground has to be fertile for something to take effect, right? Mm-hmm. So it was an Obama midterm.
Yep.
So it was fertile
Tea Party wing.
For Republicans. The Tea Party was coming out, anti-tax feeling, and so it just kind of hit. It'll be a different environment now, different media environment, different everything. So, my political antenna doesn't tell me right now that it's like going to be the biggest issue in elections.
And do you have any parting words for the Assembly members who are listening to this show right now? Anything you want to say to Josh Jensen, Ed Raw, Alex Borez, John McDonald?
Oh, I miss all my colleagues. I wish I could be eating cheese cubes with you in the members' lounge. But I wish you all luck. I'm there with you in spirit, and I hope to catch you around the bend.
What do you think it says that my demographic is Jensen, Raw, McDonald, Borez? It seems like I'm really typecasting the audience. I've got the white men of a certain age just can't get enough of Dispatches from Planet Albany.
I don't think you give yourself enough credit. I think this is much wider viewership than that.
Well, hopefully, now that we get the Ken Zebrowski bone.
I don't know. I don't know if I lived up to expectations, but
we'll get there.
I tried to grow my hair out to be better than Billy Jones before I got here.
Well, we've been speaking with former Assembly member Ken Zebrowski. He now works with Brown and Weinraub. You can find him on the road, making the trip between Rockland County and the Capitol in his hybrid
Ford Maverick.
Ice
white.
Well, Maverick, thank you for making the time. I appreciate it.
Always fun.
So it's possible that there could be more hearings?
Let me flush it out for you. Stay tuned.